Overtaken by rage, Ecocide surged toward Deicide, slashing impotently with her claws as he backpedaled into the abyss. Fawn urged Genocide to calm her sister while she looked for a way out. She found Fletchett, maintaining a sizable hole in the abyss toward the way they had come. She fired into it at steady intervals. The woman shuffled along the mutilated bodies inside the dome until they reached the tear in the black space. Outside was considerably brighter compared to the madness inside, Fawn thought, as she was pushed through the hole. As Ecocide attempted to escape the abyss, the creature oozed over the hole, sealing her in. As the woman concentrated their fire, the abyss's eyes turned outward and flared up at them as Deicide stepped through casually. As they continued to lay suppressive fire upon him, all rounds were absorbed by the abyss. Her seemingly infinite mass continued to bleed from an unseen source as the negation shells found her lightless walls. Deicide raised his hands as they emptied their magazines. Fawn attempted to reload her weapon, but Genocide stopped her by placing a hand over the toy box. Fawn scowled at the woman, but then caught the faces of Fletchett and all the others who had made it out alive. Fletchett, Second, and many more retreated with a subtle signal from Fawn. The abyss giggled as she dumped a pile of dry, shattered bones drained of their marrow. "Something for you to bury," Deicide said, grinning like a wolf god. His uniform was still creased and dry, despite the storm of wet entrails that took place within the folds of the abyss. Genocide lunged forward, but she stopped short as the abyss blocked her path. Fawn could hear the voices of the abyss in her own mind. She felt the presence of ancient women around her, whispering to her about the great success of their last son. "Go," Fawn said, as she activated her floating armor. The plush shapes lit up and began to orbit her frame. Genocide started to leave, but then paused and turned back to Deicide. "You return with your people," Deicide said. Fawn urged Genocide to leave, and as soon as the two were left alone, silence filled the space between them. The abyss waited far behind Deicide, not wanting to attack Fawn. Fawn watched as Deicide spread his kill box far into the woods. Behind her visor, Deicide's sovereignty gave off a bluish hue. She held the toy box in front of her, just above her knees. She tried to slow her pulse and listen to the monstrous echoes from Deicide's mind. Besides the choir of the abyss moaning praises of encouragement, she could also hear the whispers from signals that crossed into Deicide's mind. Fleeting, nothing remotely intelligible. The minds of Fawn and Deicide were linked now, somehow. She could hear what he could. She wondered how anyone could put up with this and still remain sane. There were so many, some babbling, others voicing unrelated concerns. She was startled by Deicide's sovereignty pressing against her suit, the only thing keeping her away from his influence inside the kill box. It radiated a field which diverted the forceful pulses being sent from Deicide. "You rush toward a death that is certain," Deicide said. "Nothing is certain," Fawn said. "My victory is." "By whose word?" "The abyss," Deicide said. "That thing is nothing more than a mirror of your own delusion," Fawn said. Deicide grinned. "Those aren't your words." "Are they true?" Fawn said. "No," Deicide said, looking back toward the abyss. "She's a promise." Fawn hefted her weapon and fired where her mind told her Deicide was to be next, but her physical reaction was far too slow. In the time it had taken her to send a message to her brain to tell her muscles to move, he had already crossed the space between them and found his way to her flank. The toy box converted to the laser saw as she spun around. Deicide caught the weapon. The laser blade singed the inside of his forearm as he crushed and warped the weapon with strength alone. Fawn snatched the weapon away and sent the battering ram toward his face. As the blunted end of the object came into contact with Deicide's scarred hand, the pressurized gas released and shot backwards out of Fawn's grip. The toy box skidded away across the damp ground before the jaws of the abyss. She consumed and wrenched it apart inside her folds. Fawn's punches and kicks were useless against Deicide, not even bothering to dodge them. Instead, he grabbed her limbs mid-strike and tossed them away. "The lionesses were only a threat because they gave everything," Deicide said. "Luckily, Abyss gives much more." Fawn opened her visor and switched off her suit. ignoring the screams in her mind telling her no. As the singing of the abyss became louder and louder, she realized that it was coming from her own mind. The abyss was already with her, telling her that she had no reason to fight Deicide. But there was also another. Fawn ignored the cries, but the touch never left. She could feel a presence slithering underneath her skin and over her eyelids. It was then that a new presence made his level of coexistence known. Fawn could feel her arteries bulge as the creature lined her arterial walls. Then her heart was caressed by a frigid claw, and Fawn expelled a frosty vapor from her lips. Fawn had never believed in a god theory, but she was sure if one did exist, it would feel exactly as she felt now. Her sovereignty began to spill over into Deicide's, forming a dog box. The two sovereignties inside were shoved violently against one another. She felt so sick to her stomach, she doubled over. Her veins shone black across her beige skin. The rapid beating of her heart was accompanied by a strange chatter, unintelligent voices babbling to her consciousness. "That's it," Deicide said. Unable to hold in the boiling stew in her gut any longer, Fawn retched up a thick gray paste. The material swirled around her legs and feet, bubbling and writhing until a face emerged at its surface. Fawn recoiled and fell over backwards. The gray sludge crawled up and over her knees and pooled onto her stomach. Its creamy eyes widened as she took notice of them. A jagged white grin formed just beneath them. It began to speak in hundreds of tongues, sounding as if someone was tuning a cosmic radio, and then, as if by magic, Fawn could understand this mass speak. As she rose, she could see that the abyss was smiling with her eyes, the connection between them severed. Fawn's body had finally transformed the vestige material into something usable. It was a miracle she had not died before the process was complete. The gray vestige flared its long and flat ribbon arms, slowly wafting behind Fawn like a great idyllic sun. It was Long Arms. Deicide approached casually as the abyss loomed over him, like an ominous black cloud. With each breath, Fawn could feel the union become more and more complete. This new entity, this other, was parsing her every memory, consuming what it felt was pertinent. Then suddenly her hate for Deicide drained away, and there was only concern for her brother. The animalistic malice she had struggled with her entire life was encapsulated by this strange creature. Her hate had a face, and it shone itself just behind her head, a grinning, white-eyed monster. Her vestige clung to her shoulders and wrapped itself around her arms, where it hung like a gray shawl. It snickered rudely at thoughts most decent people kept to themselves, in an attempt to keep society civilized. It was then she realized what this creature was, an embodiment of the wicked little devil and pious angel that sat on each shoulder. But this being was much more honest than the pair. Pure consciousness, pure impulse. Suddenly, the abyss needled the earth around Fawn with her black tendrils. She avoided them easily and prepared for Deicide's rush. As he struck with blinding speeds, Fawn anticipated the attacks as they moved within all the space of the dog box. It was almost as if gravity did not exist. As she fell upwards into the night sky, she repelled downwards as the abyss arced to slice at her. She touched down, but soon leapt away as giant black thorns peppered the trees around her. It took all of her focus to avoid the jaws of the abyss snapping and gnashing all around her. From behind her, Deicide emerged from the ocean of the abyss and ripped at the vestige that surrounded her. She watched as the scars at the corners of his lips tore open to allow his jaws to increase their circumference. He thrust the gray vestige he had torn away into his mouth and chewed it like a wad of gum. Fawn had been completely surrounded by the abyss, and only Deicide remained in the darkness. The only light available was coming from his antennas. To Fawn it seemed they had battled for an eternity within the black dome. Her muscles were beginning to shake, and her teeth felt loose. She could no longer dodge the abyss or Deicide. He had consumed most of her vestige, and she felt as though she would collapse in front of him if they went on any longer. Deicide grinned as the abyss nailed her to the ground with black spears. She struggled to sit up, but one was driven straight through her left shoulder. Two through her legs had broken both of her femurs. As the abyss snatched her tendrils back unmercifully, she giggled and drew herself away, revealing the night sky once more. She happily shrank back to her usual size and formed around Deicide like a cloak. Fawn desperately struggled to raise her head, as the remaining vestige plugged her wounds to avoid her bleeding out. Deicide knelt over her and brushed her pink bangs out of her face. Her head trembled as she desperately strained her muscles to move, but she was helpless to stop him. She looked up into his eyes, hating him, wanting to taste his blood. A bitter taste filled her mouth. The vestige was secreting pain relievers into her system, and she closed her eyes and waited for the cold embrace of death.